Hi, it's Dr. Paul Carlisle again, and I'm glad that you're back with me as we're going to take on parenting and some aspects of that that can help you today and in the future. I've called it You Can Do It. And I mentioned last time you still may have questions about that, and that's totally okay. I really do want to do what the subtitle says, help parents grow healthy kids. I think it's possible. Amidst the difficulties and the challenges and the complexities, I believe and I wish for you the ability to do it. So let's move in today's lesson. We're going to look at how your childhood, when you were growing up, impacts your parenting today. Now, that might be one of those new, kind of strange, odd, different thoughts, but I want you to hold it in your hands and let's work with it some, because it's true. How you grew up had an impact on you as a child, as a teen, and it will have an impact on how you parent. You'll notice here in this slide, we have a gentleman, a dad, with his little boy sitting in his lap, and he's reading to him. And then in the second slide with the mother, father, and two kids, I'm imagining that that's the little boy who is now a dad reading to his kids. Things are passed along. People receive life, direction, knowledge from other people. Back to that idea of the nature of a child in our last session. We said children are valuable, vulnerable, needy or dependent, imperfect and immature, but I want to focus in very sharply on the valuable and the vulnerable. Of course they're valuable. They're of immense, immeasurable value, but they're also vulnerable. And that has a significant emphasis for us today in this lesson, because we're going to look at your vulnerability as a child and how your parents impacted and shaped aspects of your personality. Hopefully mostly for good, but also there can be negative. I like this idea of children are like wet clay. You can see in this first graphic on the left, a person has their hands around that clay. They've just put it kind of in a ball and plopped it on there. And those hands, as that wheel begins to spin, they begin to shape with the use of water and other things, but mainly their hands, to shape that piece of clay into a vase or a mug or a bowl. In the same way, we're going to be emphasizing and looking at today how your parents placed their hands metaphorically around your life and influenced and shaped you and shaped the way you are parenting today. This pretty funny little pictures. You've got the picture of a guy that's pulling his tie up, and if you'll notice, his son's doing the same thing. And then you have a mom with the son. She's striking a yoga pose, and he's doing the same thing. Children literally imitate others, but the main others are their parents initially, until they get old enough and get around other people. It's a natural God-designed thing. That little baby's brain that you see there in that picture as mom holds her, that little baby's brain is designed to catch and connect and be in some ways kind of one with her mom. We know now that all of us have mirror neurons, and that little baby is staring right into the eyes of its mom, and the mom's looking back at it. And at that time, that little baby's brain is trying to fire like it senses its mama's brain is fired. If we had a way of scanning their brains at this time, we could see that. Now that's because of mirror neurons. Just a little bit of neuroscience. There are these neurons called mirror neurons that help us see and understand and grasp other people in a mirroring fashion. It's an amazing thing. So that little brain's designed to connect with parents. And here are some other just facts. That infant's brain automatically will seek out the parent. It's going to seek out someone because, remember the word vulnerable? When you were small, you did that. You would seek out a parent or someone to nurture, to help, to protect, to provide for you. As I mentioned earlier, that infant's brain will try to mimic the firing of the mom's or whoever the primary caregiver is. Usually it's the mom. Children must have parents to regulate their emotions. We'll talk a little more about that. A child, I'm not telling you anything new, right? They don't have a way to regulate and manage their own emotions. The parents or parent has to do that. And that little child, that little infant will rely on the parent for safety and nurture and calming. And we're going to see the more safety that's provided and the nurture and the calming emotionally, the healthier that little baby will grow into a toddler and a child, a teen, than an adult. Parents have the power, so the graphic says. You can see that on the posters. What I'm trying to get at is parents have the power to frame their child's personality in a powerful way that will continue into the child's adult life. Wow, that is a really big deal. Let's take a minute and look at that a little more closely. The aspects of this sentence. Frame, I'm thinking of how somebody frames up a house, how they would go about putting basically 2x4s and 2x6s up, and you would have what we call sometimes a stick house, a no sheetrock, nothing on the outside at all. But you have a frame of a house. Parents have the power to frame the child's personality. And it's a powerful thing that we've been given the privilege and responsibility of doing with children. And that personality, once framed and shaped a certain way, is going to continue a long, long time into adult life. And I believe it doesn't change unless the adult decides, gosh, I need to reflect on this, and I need to improve and grow my personality another way. Especially for us Christians, we think about how do we do that with the life of Christ. Now, rather than time out, I'm calling it a time to reflect. I have some things I want you to think about for a few minutes before we move ahead with the training. Think about some aspects of your personality, who you are today, and then think, what aspects of my personality were definitely framed by my parents? Good or bad, positive or negative. List several of those characteristics if you can take time to do that. They may be similar to your parents' characteristics, or they may be opposite or very different than them. The characteristics that are opposite of the parents are often the ones that we want to live out as parents ourselves now, not a child, but as a parent, in a different way. We can be, if we're not careful, overreacting maybe to a parent's strictness, and we are too lax. So take some time, think about that, and then we're going to continue. Your childhood experience, because you're vulnerable, the parents can give you a view of who you are. Now, it may not be accurate. You may be called a troublemaker, and what if you were just an energetic little kid? And look, if you will, at that first graphic. It represents the negative. It's somebody with a hand over their face, like they're embarrassed, they're ashamed, they feel bad about themselves, they feel like they're a disappointment. Sometimes the view we're given by our parents, the child can interpret it, and maybe you're one of those that interpreted it as something was wrong with you. You weren't enough. Then you see the picture of this lady showing her muscle. That's competent, and that's strong, and that's stable. I wish for you a lot of that type view of yourself. If you started out over there with the other graphic where there's disappointment or you don't feel competent, my wish and hope for you is that you can move toward the strength and the competency, and maybe these lessons will help with that. You know what else your parents and your childhood experiences created for you? A view of others. So a view of yourself and a view of others. I had to figure out how to get my hand in front of that little video camera. The first graphic on the far left shows belonging and acceptance and safety and having your back and trust. The second one is a horrible thing where our trust by our parents unintentionally, often, not every time, but often, our trust is broken and we can't rely on them to help us emotionally as much as we'd like, or intellectually, or relationally. So we have a tendency as a small child to begin to try to handle that ourselves, and we're just too small. So our vulnerability sets us up to have parents give us a view of ourselves and others, and guess what else? A view of the world. You'll see in the graphic on the far left, people that are looking at a bunch of alligators. Now they're in a safe place, but I'm trying to represent if you grew up where it wasn't safe, and it wasn't stable, and it wasn't consistent and reliable, it would be considered an unsafe environment. Not that you had to be abused, even though some of you that are listening to this, you may have had that history. Well, it's an unsafe environment, and a child can, by the environment of the parents, begin to view their world as unsafe. It can't be trusted. I'm a disappointment. See, the view of the self, the view of others, and the view of the world. And of course, what we would love for you to have is home was a safe, reliable, stable place. A place where you could come in from having been in kindergarten or 5th grade or high school or college and found a safe, warm, attentive place in your home. Be thinking about how these areas impacted you, like your view of yourself or of others or of the world. Now, how do parents shape those particular views of the self, others, and the world? And in the world, I would include God. That would be an aspect of that. A child at 1 year old may have 1 or 2 words. So we're not going to be talking and dialoguing with a 1-year-old. A 2-year-old may have 50 by the time they get into the second year. And 3-year-olds, believe it or not, and this is a wild thing too, will have up to 2 to 300 words. They can begin to talk back to you, give their voice, share what they're thinking. But before that, the child is relying on a part of you that's not your words, your facial expressions you'll see on the slide, your voice tone, or your words, even your words themselves. They have an impact on your child because that is how the child learns initially to communicate. Now, you won't remember that because you had this implicit memory up to about age 4. Some psychologists call it amnesia in childhood, but you just don't have a lot of clarity until 4, 5, or 6 of memories. And think of it this way. This is how your parents shaped you. If it's like this first graphic, if you saw a predominant face and voice tone like this lady, like, you better stop it, and however that would sound to you, that's going to impact you. It's going to tell you that maybe you're not so valuable, or maybe your view is not significant, or maybe your feelings are not really accurate. The second graphic is a disappointed kind of parent. You didn't live up to the standards, you weren't perfect. Sometimes kids hear that. And the third one is a pretty positive thing, like, yeah, way to go. You did so well. Yay, yay, yay. So that's how the voice and or the voice tone and the facial expression and the words have an impact on you, even when you don't have words, because your brain takes that in. Now, another time to reflect. Think back, if you will, about the message your parents' voice or voice tone and nonverbals and words, what message did you interpret about you? I hope it was you were valuable or competent or worthy, but it may not have been. It may have been that you didn't feel very valuable or very competent. Or your view of others, the second one, trustworthy, reliable, available, but maybe it wasn't that way. Maybe it was the opposite. It didn't feel like anyone was there to have your back. Or the world is safe. Was it safe or unsafe for you? Take some time, reflect on those. In this last question, what message did your parents send to you with their voice, facial expressions, and words, kind of encapsulating this whole time of reflection? Give some thought. Maybe want to jot it down on a piece of paper. Maybe it's something, if you're in a group, you can share with each other. And I'll be right back with you. Attunement is a word that's very, very popular now in counseling and psychology. And it describes, when it's talking about a parent attuning to a child, it's how responsive a parent is to a child's emotional needs and their moods. We know now that that is so critical to the child. We didn't know that when my parents were parenting me back in 1956. This is newer knowledge as far as the neuroscience, the mid to late 80s and 90s. We understand now that nurturing, soothing, and teaching them how to manage emotions is central to health. And you have an image here of a mom, and it's a pretty cool one because she looks like she's really attuned to that little guy. He's playing, maybe that's a cape he's got on, and she's just smiling. So his little mirror neurons are picking up, I'm having a good time, mama likes me, mama wants me. And this attunement for a parent to a child is essential for healthy development. I can't overemphasize that. We're just really clear as the helping community that this is critical and important. When it's absent, a child's going to have to do remedial work on themselves when they're an adult, whether it's counseling or pastor or coaching or friends. Look in both of these graphics. You can see that the little child, the little girl, looks like she's been crying or she's upset or she's afraid, and mom's just really connected to her, it looks like. And we've got a little girl that's tired, or maybe she's a little sad, and dad's just holding her. They're communicating with their body, touch, with their nonverbals, facial, maybe even their voice tone, and of course with their words too. How well did your parents attune to you? Now, please, we're not going to beat up parents. What I want to know is what you as a child interpreted by their actions, behaviors, and nonverbals. And you'll see this kind of cheesy or corny graphic of the parent pouring water on a child. We're going to look at parenting styles. And what I want you to get from this graphic is what you soaked in from your parents. The parents are influencing, they're pouring the water, and they are getting it on you as a child, kind of the way you lived and the way you sort of took them in. And we're going to look at 4 different styles from a man named John Gottman. His book on raising emotionally intelligent children is a good read, and it's where I got this from. The first type of parenting is a dismissing parent. Now, the child's feelings are treated as if they're not very important, not significant. The parent really wants this child's emotions, just that are negative, just to disappear. believes that those negative emotions this parent does, the dismissive, are harmful, they show little interest in what the child says. It's like this parent has difficulty having a deep, resonating empathy that lets them enter into the child's life. Now, as I'm going through these, think about your parent or parents and see if you tick any of these or check any of these off. Also, I will have these in a PDF for you so that you can have those and look at them more than just on this session. The parent can be frustrated or overwhelmed by the child's emotions. It may mean that the parent never learned to have, feel, and experience their own emotions in a healthy and regulated way. They can believe that emotions mean that the child is just not well adjusted. It's very inaccurate, very sad, but sometimes parents can believe that about their child. A dismissing parent. This next parent is not just dismissing, but a step more intense. They are disapproving. They don't just disagree with the child's having negative emotions. They may judge them and criticize the child's emotions, make fun of them. They may discipline and punish the child because the child's having negative emotions. The child learns just we're not supposed to have those, and they sort of swallow them or detach from them. They believe that negative emotions need to be controlled. This would be more of a black and white belief system. They're never good, they're only bad. They can believe that negative emotions are just a waste of time. That could be the parent, this disapproving parent's attitude. Highly concerned with strict obedience. Again, I would say it's a black and white, a little bit more controlling. And they believe emotions make you weak. We've heard that quite a bit in the past. And that's not true at all. Emotions are this ability and strength that we have to engage what we feel as we're with others or with God or as we're experiencing life. The third one is a name that I've had to work on to pronounce. It's laissez-faire parenting. Laissez-faire. It doesn't look like laissez, but that's how it's pronounced. They freely accept all the child's emotional expressions. That's a little different than the disapproving, dismissing. They offer child comfort when they have these negative emotions, or they attempt to comfort them. But here is where it becomes a little unhealthy. This parent is very permissive. In other words, they don't set limits. These children need to have a container around their emotions, the parents. And I don't mean dismissing or disapproving, but validating and helping them know how to work through them. But the laissez-faire parent does not. They offer little guidance on the child's behavior. These are the children, if you're around them, they just kind of run wild, whether it's through your house or the school. Does not teach the child about emotions. Really don't, as I mentioned earlier, don't set limits. There's got to be a balance, not disapproving or dismissing, but not laissez-faire, anything goes either. Here's the healthy one that John Gottman, the author, where I got these ideas from, would say is an emotional or an emotion coach parent. Think of a coach, one who kind of knows if it's a baseball game or football game or basketball or volleyball. They know the way. So the parent knows the way of the emotions, their own, and they're going to help the child. They view negative emotions as an opportunity to connect, to be intimate with the child. Sensitive to the child's emotional state. They don't make light of the child's negative emotions. They're not judgmental or critical. Also, now notice this one. It's a little bit of a brain teaser. They don't have to fix every problem the child has. Think about that. Children gradually will learn through practice and repetition to resolve things. Now, we don't want them pulling each other's hair out. We're not talking about that. But the parent does not have to fix 100% of the child's problems. This parent can empathize and soothe the child's emotion. They become a real healthy container for the child's emotion. And then they are really good about setting limits. And they're teaching what is an emotional expression. What's healthy? What's good? So a time of reflection for this, if you would. Look back, and this will be a PDF, a handout for you, at those 4 parenting styles and see which style best fit your parents. Now, you may have a mixture with one of your parents. Maybe they're a little laissez-faire and a little bit dismissive, or a little emotional coach and a little bit laissez-faire. Or a father could be one way and a mother could be another way. And how did your parents, once you identify their style or mixture of styles, how did that impact you? Which parenting style would have helped you the most? And why do you think that's so? What parenting style are you? Is that similar or different than your parent? And you may want to think, how do I move toward this emotional coach style? That would let you set up some plans and some structure and change in routines to do so. What do you do if the parental influence that you grew up with was negative? Maybe it was dismissive and disapproving. Well, you're going to need to learn that feelings are okay. Believe it or not, they're essential. The part of my brain, kind of my thinking brain here, my more emotional brain here, kind of above my ears, back to my brainstem. That lower part of the brain, sometimes called the basement, is where emotions are. And our thinking brain and our emotional brain are to be connected and working together. When we have too much emotion, we disconnect from the thinking brain. You don't need to be all thinking or all emotional. You should be a combination of those two. Those are not only okay, feelings are okay, but they're necessary for healthy relationships. Just take a walk through Scripture and look at the emotional words. It's pretty awesome. You'll need to practice identifying your feelings, and I want you to think about feelings, the ones you are having, as in a family. Think of it as a family of feelings, because you'll have to learn this if you had dismissing or disapproving parenting styles. On the far left top corner is happy. Next to that is kind of sad. That's a feeling family. Below the happy is a fear, and then underneath the sad is an anger. Now, those are 4 definite emotion types. In each of the emotions, that's why I call them a family. Like there is a happy family of emotions. They go, if you'll look toward the bottom of the slide, 0 to 10. If you're just a little bit happy, like a 1 or a 2, you might just be pleased or calm. If you're at a 10, you're exuberant and excited and whacked out of your brain. Each one of these have lots of words we use to describe each family: the happy family, sad, fearful, and angry. Begin to start trying to identify your feelings if that's a difficulty you have. And just an important thought that I want to give you. As you're reflecting on how your parents related to you, it may be good to have compassion for you and possibly your parents. I'm emphasizing possibly. You sure need to have compassion for you as you're trying to figure out how you were shaped and what impacted you and what your interpretation of the parental environment was. The second paragraph says, I say possibly because your parents may have parented out of their own woundedness. Have you thought about that? Not wanting to minimize your wounds or what happened to you if you have those. But your parents may have been wounded and didn't really know how to do what they were doing. And they really had no ideas they were causing you harm. It's the military idea of friendly fire. But my last statement is also one I want you to hear. Intentional harm by a parent is never, capital Never, acceptable. It's not. I'm sorry we get wounded and we get hurt in their developmental deficiencies that we have going in through living with our parents and family, because they're human too. But intentional harm is not acceptable. Now, my parents, your parents, myself as a parent, I'm responsible for what I did even if I was ignorant. So I can do that repair that we talked about last time. Back to what if there was a negative influence with the dismissing and disapproving. Not only will you identify your feelings, but at the very bottom of this slide, you'll identify your child's feelings. See how cool that is? You identify yours, then you can step over in your child when they have a sad face or they have a mad face. You can kind of step over and give words to what they feel. Laissez-faire, you got to learn that negative emotions can be managed. We can help the children with that. Not saying it's simple, not saying it's easy, but we can do that. They're going to also need the laissez-faire parent, if you had one of those, and you've kind of grown up under that. You'll need to identify your emotions and your child's, and you'll need to learn what healthy emotional expression is. Now for the emotional coach skills. That parent viewed negative emotions as an opportunity to connect and have intimacy, and that they could teach their child. By the way, if you're going to do that, you'll have to be lower stress, like we said in our first session, and you're going to have to be able to regulate those emotions better, which the lower stress will help with. This type parent practices being sensitive to the child's emotional state. Child is sad. Remember the different families: happy, fearful, mad. They don't make light of a child's negative emotions. They don't try to fix every problem the child has. Remember when we said that? They empathize and soothe the child's emotion. They can calm their own, and they can calm their child's. They know how to set limits, and they know how to teach acceptable emotional expression. And that's not by laissez-faire, where all emotions are to be expressed at the extreme, or the disapproving or the dismissing, where no negative emotions are allowed. It's different than those two. A little bit of reflection. List the things your parent did, or parents, that was good and healthy. And you may want to keep doing those when you find out what those things are. Or maybe you already know. List the things your parents did that were less healthy, maybe even unhealthy, and replace them with healthier methods with your children. The unhealthiness of our parents can wound us. We even might need to seek professional help. I started having a counselor in my life and saw the value and importance of it to help me grow and mature and heal in '94. And since then, I keep a therapist close to myself, if nothing else, just to check in. So I highly recommend that. And here's the last slide. Practices to continue. Practice can consist of reflecting, remember, self-reflection, being curious about your history, how your family shaped you, and that healthy self-reflection can lead you to self-improvement. That's what we're wanting: growth, maturity. Once you've identified some of your parents' parenting style, then you can create, if you need to, correctives in your parenting styles. And empathy, the ability to step over in the world, the inside world of your child, and pick up the emotions, the feelings, the behaviors, the thoughts. That empathy needs to be practiced and practiced and practiced. Well, we've covered quite a bit of territory today, and next time we're going to look at aspects of your child's brain development to try to understand why they do what they do. We'll be pretty creative. We're not going to bore you at all. We're not going to overwhelm you with technical phrases, but if you understand some things about the way God made the brain, you'll be a more effective parent. I look forward to that next time.